A lot of Malaysians are talking about the possibility of graduating from the kind of ethnic based parties and racial politics that we have to something other than that, and a kind of non racial future. But in many ways, we do see that ethnic or demands for ethnic representation continue. We saw it in the debacle over the DAP's General Assembly elections. We saw it and continue to happen with the negotiations between Hindraf and the Pakatan Rakyat. Their demands for either seats to contest in against the MIC and the like. Where does ethnic politics go when we're looking at, say, multiracial parties like your own in PKR?
I think when you mentioned the word representation, I don't have a problem with a demand for representation, because you can see that can take place in two different contexts. One is within a multiracial party, you must have representation. It's also quite meaningless to speak of multiracial politics without actually having, let's say, that multi-ethnic label reflected, for example, in the leadership, the middle level leadership, and of course, ultimately the policies and so on and programs of that party. But I think what the desire for change that people are talking about is from that mono-ethnic party-based politics, which Barisan Nasional has basically encapsulated and propagated from 1957, first in the form of the Alliance and now Barisan Nasional. So I think that's the transition we're doing. 55 years of that experience, of course, has also shaped our society, and I don't think it's going to be that simple to walk away from ethnic, the language of ethnic demands. Yeah. And I think that language will persist even within multiracial political frameworks, and that's going to be a process. But I'll just speak. I can share my experience in Keadilan. For example, I entered politics in 98 after Reformasi. I joined Parti Rakyat because that was the party that most appealed to me with its progressive, non-ethnic approach to politics. And we merged with Parti Keadilan Nasional, that became Pakatan Rakyat. But let me say this, the party that I saw, the PKN Keadilan Nasional Party that I saw in 99 is totally removed from what Parti Keadilan Rakyat is now. And even from 2003,
So you mean from kind of a kind of offshoot of UMNO, it's become something more. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and you could see the transformation year after year from 2003. When I was part of that finally, where every the Congress every year, and the debates, the discussions of people, you could see the shift. And over the last 5-6 years, you could see it. Where we had. I'm quite proud of the party Congress, because that is when you really see the articulation of non-ethnic politics. When you see Malay leaders pound the rostrum and say and make very clear non-ethnic arguments, talking the arguments of politics on principle, protecting everybody's rights, and articulated by all races.
But what about so the persistence of those demands for, say, an Indian person being there on the rostrum? Are there do parties like yours put in place some sort of quota? Is there a need to have actually those faces there? We must have at least one Indian. We must have at least half the list must be women. I mean, they're now, in fact, it's gone beyond the questions of ethnicity. We're also looking, and I think the Pakatan has promised 10 cabinet positions for women. So what are these? I mean, what does it mean to talk about? Can these things actually be progressive, or are they just a remnant of an older time when everybody wanted their ethnic representative in the lineup?
Well, yeah. I mean, people still want to see ethnic representation. That's true, and I think that is the hangover of the framework we've had for the last 55 years. Barisan Nasional has, you can't underestimate the impact of 55 years of more of ethnic politics and polarizing politics. Even the formations on the opposition side, largely, until the emergence of Keadilan as a force, was really also to some extent ethnic based. I mean, PAS is essentially a Malay based party. The DAP support base is still largely ethnic Chinese. You can't run away from that. So, And I think that those insecurities are still there with people, so people still want to see representation, and it's going to take time. It's going to take some time when we will get there. But I'm not saying that all parties need to do that. Kadilan will try to do that.
Are you seen as an Indian leader within PKR by your constituents or by your party members?
I don't know. I mean, the impression I get from party members and leaders is that I'm not seen as an Indian leader per se, because I seem to be able to speak for different races, because people judge me on the issues that I've taken up and so on, and I'm seen as a person who speaks for all. But of course, that's a complaint also, from the perspective of certain Indian leaders, certain Indian members who say, well, I'm not Indian enough, or rather I don't match the level of Indianness that they expect. So I suppose their perception is they expect me to be perhaps articulating just only Indian issues. But I say, no, that's not what I'm here for. And I'm quite clear about that. I wouldn't have come to this party. But there are Indian leaders who do that. And I think this is a process of transition. And this transition is not going to happen in a year or two, or in 5 or 10 years. It's going to take longer. But Kadilan as a party will aspire to get there, where finally different communities will not worry so much about representation, but will focus more on what is being articulated on their behalf. And it could be by anybody. It could be, other races. But it's going to take time.
Can I just ask you about the specifics of the the Hindraf claim that they are actually mobilizing the ground, that they are the ones who can get the Indian vote out and for or against particular parties? Is that something that the Pakatan takes very seriously and will, or are there ways of sort of thinking about how to incorporate that Hindraf demand?
We respect Hindraf as a social movement that mobilized, the ground successfully in 2007, that created a momentum, a wave, which had impact on the 2008 election. I think all that nobody can deny. At the same time, the movement subsequently became heavily fragmented. Leadership, internecine quarrels, and I think today, whether they can claim that level of support is something debatable. But that's what they say. I'm not here to debate that or question that. We're dealing with Hindraf basically like we would deal with any other social movement. The Chinese educationists come with demands. The Chinese business community arrives with demands. NIAT, another Indian grouping, claims to also represent a particular constituency. In fact, they have also prepared exhaustive proposals in the form of programs and policies for the benefit of the Indian community. You have the Himpunan Hijau movement, you have the royalty movement, you've got the anti-liners movement. Any major political force has to negotiate and deal with a wide variety of societal movements. And for us, we respect Hindraf as one of those voices. We're not here to downgrade the voice, but it's one of many voices. And I think that's what Hindraf also has to recognize. I don't think they have a monopoly on the Indian voice, and if we look at the actual reality of programs on the ground, I think the programs that we do attract huge numbers of Indian supporters when we do our work properly, and I think the Indians in Malaysia also are looking for alternatives. I think they can see the MIC has failed them in that sense. Their social economic realities show them that the MIC has failed them, and they're looking for something else. And I think Kadilan is the natural place for them. And Kadilan being the force that holds Pakatan together is that place where the Indians will find their political future. And that is the challenge now we have as leaders in Kadilan, to articulate that hope for them, that future for them. And that future has to be, as a minority group, I think Indians need to recognize, like for example, the Muslim minority in India, they don't articulate their demands in ethnic or religious terms, no, because they recognize they are a minority, a 15% minority. So they articulate their hopes and aspirations in the form of fundamental rights, and that's how it has to work, so as to not to be swamped by a majority. a Hindu majority. And I think the Indian community here, being a 7 to 8% group, has to understand that their ultimate protection and future and security comes from basic fundamental rights being protected, respected by all, and equitable fair access to the opportunities that this country presents. Equitable access, fair access to education opportunities, work opportunities, business opportunities, and so on, and finding the means to ensure that.
You talk about you talk about the PKR being a natural leader of the three main parties in the coalition. How is that shaping up? How does coalition politics actually operate in sort of bringing in creating a kind of single voice? Perhaps, who does the negotiations? Are they party based? As we talk about the Hindraf, or would it be something from the Pakatan as a whole? How does that operate?
I mentioned Keadilan as a natural leader. I mean, in this context, first we have to say again that we are equals. I mean, that principle is quite clear in the Pakatan coalition. Having said that, the reality is that I think DAP and PAS together can operate in a working coalition, mainly because of Pakatan in the middle, bringing it all together, binding it and making it happen. So I think that for me is a political reality. No matter how anybody else would want to see it.
Sometimes UMNO is criticized for being too dominant within the Barisan Nasional. It's seen to be manipulating other political parties and, in fact, pushing candidates of their choice against the desires of that party. But do you see this something of a paradox that, in fact, having a party that is, first among equals, as it were, really does help bind the coalition and give it kind of direction, and that in time this might actually happen with Pakatan too?
I think you're right. Keadilan's clear multi-ethnic structure, membership, composition, and political outlook and program, I mean, is what allows us to actually then bring the other two. In other words, it would be really quite difficult for PAS and DAP by themselves, to actually, I mean, if one tried to imagine a coalition directly between those two, I think, would have been quite impossible.
So speaking about PAS, the tensions within PAS have become more and more palpable over the years. We've had Hassan Ali leave from State Assembly, his position in the Selangor State government. We've had Nasruddin Mat Isa also, kind of moving away from his party. Now, is it conceivable that PAS would split, that there is going to be, and how will the coalition as a whole stay together in the event of something like that?
Well, that's a little too far ahead to predict, but let's talk about PAS. There have been a few individuals in PAS who I think basically espoused a much more UMNO-like politics. In other words, Malay comes first rather than Islam. And I would put those individuals you just mentioned in that group, Hassan Ali, Nasruddin, and so on. But I think that group is in a small minority. Their agendas have failed to capture the support of the majority, and they're on the way out. Hassan was sacked, Nasruddin is going nowhere, and I think their followers have accepted the reality that PAS is going to maintain its position within the Pakatan coalition. So I think, really, we're not too worried about that aspect yet. The dominant thinking amongst leadership, right down to the grassroots of PAS, is that its future is with Pakatan. So, but coming back to the coalition as a whole, there's an interesting thing about Pakatan as a coalition. In many countries, coalitions are formed post-election. Every party goes into the election on its own program, its own appeal to the voters, and then depending on the support, the popular vote, or the seats you secure, then you do your horse trading, you form coalitions, because you need that for an overall majority, for control. And then that's when you sometimes you then sit down and write the program, the common program, and you quickly present it to the voters and say, this is the coalition, and for jointly holding power, this is what we promise you. And you do exactly that. And of course, if you break that agreement, then the coalition sometimes falls apart. Pakatan is been able to demonstrate, in fact, a stronger foundation, if I may, and I think that's important for people to appreciate that under the leadership of Anwar, and I think this one you have to credit Anwar Ibrahim, because I can't see any other individual who could have pulled this off. That he was able to bring the coalition together, even from jail. Don't forget, Pakatan started as the Barisan Alternative in 1999. He was in jail, and he managed it even in jail. Of course, he came out of jail, and I think it's strengthened since then, building a coalition, and not just a structure. It's not just a formal structure. Well, it's certainly not informal, but it's not just a structure. It's got a solid program. So we started writing down a common program, first in the form of manifestos. The Buku Jingga was the initial one, then a revised version, and now you've got a new manifesto. So we're a coalition, we're a pre-election coalition, and I think that says something.
Is that something that Malaysians demand, that they want to see some sort of security, some sense of that this is going to be a working coalition? Because that is often the criticism that's made against the Pakatan, that this was not going to be a coalition that's going to stick together because of the kind of ideological diversity within it. But why not? I think this is where people need to understand. Ideological diversity is a reality in any coalition. It's a political fact. One doesn't have to get... one has to be realistic. Well, this is fact in any country. If parties are the same, they'll be in the same party. Coalitions are about different parties, and sometimes quite different ideologies. What coalitions succeed in doing is coming together for power and adopting common platforms. And I think that's the question to ask: has Pakatan successfully adopted a common program? And I think we have a platform, and it's there. It's there in broad principle, it's there in its details, and it's there in writing, and it's signed on. So that is what we will do as a coalition if we are mandated to run this country, and we will do no less. We're not going to adopt and propagate the ideologies of specific parties. That's not what we are about. And I think that's quite fundamental. To take the contentious Hudud issue, for example. Hudud will always remain as an aspiration for past. And you can't take that away from them. As Democrats, they're entitled to espouse as their own political aspiration that. But it is certainly not part and cannot ever be part of the Pakatan program, which is written down in black and white, which is clearly upholding the federal constitution and so on. And I think that's that's the essence of coalition politics, which is perhaps new to Malaysians. It's something that they're learning. I mean, this is the process of it. And going back to the question of whether Malaysians demanded it, I think Malaysians needed to see the emergence of such a coalition, because only such a coalition could actually present a serious challenge to Barisan. If you were coming as a fragmented group of parties, I think that itself would not inspire the confidence that this is a government in waiting. It's no longer just an opposition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.